The deed hit the table before Aaron Wells had fully opened his eyes. He sat up from the cot in the back of the bridge toll house, hand already reaching for the short sword he kept against the wall, and found instead a pair of green hands pressed flat on the scarred wood, and above those hands a face that stopped him cold. She was watching him with amber eyes that caught the first thin light of dawn the way river ice catches fire before it melts, and she was breathing hard, as though she had been running for longer than she wanted to admit. Her tusks were ivory and straight, her dark hair pulled back in a thick braid wound through with copper wire, and she wore fitted warrior's leathers the color of pine shadow, a short, close-laced bodice of dark green over a snug underlayer of oiled black wool, her trousers tucked into tall boots with iron-buckled cuffs, 2 short axes on her belt, and a long-handled war blade across her back. She was built like a storm given a body, broad-shouldered, full-figured, strong in a way that made the room feel smaller, and she was looking at him as though he were a problem she had already solved. The deed was his. He could see the wax seal of Rivingard's land office and his own cramped signature at the bottom, and the document should have been locked in the iron strongbox under the bridge warden's desk where he had left it 3 days ago. "That is mine," he said. "I know," she said. "I took it." He stared at her. The oil lamp on the desk had burned low overnight, and the dawn coming through the slit window was gray and cold, and outside he could hear the cauldron moving under ice, that low grinding moan the river made in the worst of winter. He was still mostly asleep, and she was standing at his table with his stolen deed, and apparently no guilt whatsoever about either of those facts. "You broke into my strongbox," he said. "Your strongbox has a pin tumbler lock, 4 pins. It took me less than a minute. That was a good lock. For a goat pen, perhaps." He got up from the cot. He was tall for a human, but she still had 2 inches on him, and when he stood she did not step back, just watched him with those amber eyes, her jaw set. Up close she smelled of cold air and pine resin and something warmer underneath, wood smoke and iron, and he was suddenly very aware that he was standing in his undershirt. "Are you going to tell me why?" he said. "Gurn Blacktusk has men at the northern ford," she said. 3 of them arrived last night after the 2nd bell. They were asking the ferryman your name and whether you lived alone. The ferryman told them. The ferryman also told them about the strongbox, because apparently everyone at the Cauldron Crossing knows that is where you keep your deed. Aaron went still. He knew the name Gurn Blacktusk. Everyone at the crossing knew it. Gurn was an Orc clan champion out of the Stoneback Ridge territory, a man who had decided that the bridge toll rights over the cauldron were worth more than they cost to seize, and who had been making that interest known for the better part of the autumn through messages sent to the land office, and one very uncomfortable visit to the toll house, 3 weeks ago, during which he had examined the whole building with a proprietary eye, and told Aaron that the crossing would be in better hands before the river froze solid. The river had frozen solid 4 days ago. Aaron had been waiting since then. "If they take the deed," she said, "Gurn can file a loss of title claim with the land office at Rivingard and name himself the interim custodian of the crossing. It is an old trick. He has done it twice before at other river posts. The land office takes 3 months to investigate, and in the meantime whoever holds the crossing holds it. By the time the investigation is done, Gurn has made enough in tolls to buy the ruling he wants." "I know all of that," Aaron said. "That is why I locked the deed in A." He stopped. He looked at the document on the table. He looked at her. "You took it to keep it safe." "I took it," she said, "because I hate loose ends." She picked the deed up, rolled it, and held it out to him. He took it, and their fingers overlapped for a moment on the paper, and she looked at that point of contact as though it surprised her, and then she looked away. "Who are you?" he said. "Sharamph Stonefist," she said. "I crossed the bridge yesterday at midday. You charged me the standard toll, 2 coppers, and you did not make me wait on the cold side while you checked whether an orc was worth letting across." He remembered her. He had a policy about that everyone paid the same toll and waited the same time, but he remembered her specifically because she had looked at him for just a moment after he waved her through, the way someone looks when they expected a fight and did not get one and are not sure what to do with that. He had not thought much about it at the time. He thought about it now. "You stayed in the settlement last night," he said. "I had business." "What business?" She tilted her head. The copper wire in her braid caught the dawn light. "The kind that led me to a toll house at first light with a stolen deed, and 3 of Gurn Blacktusk's men watching the northern approach." He walked to the window and looked out. The cauldron crossed the land here at the bottom of a long, rocky valley, the bridge a single span of dressed stone that his father had built and that he had maintained for 6 years since his father's death. The settlement of Ashford Crossing clustered on the near bank. A tavern, a dry goods store, a smithy, a handful of houses. On the far bank was the northern road, and where that road bent around the granite shoulder of the hill he could see, just barely, the dark shapes of 3 men sitting horses in the gray pre-dawn. "They are waiting for the toll house to open," he said. "Yes. And when they do not find the deed, they will know someone moved it. They will look for who. If they connect me to this, it becomes complicated." She said it flatly, not as a complaint, as a statement of logistics. "I need to be out of Ashford Crossing before they identify me as the one who was in your strongbox." "Then go," he said. She looked at him again. Something shifted in those amber eyes, something he could not quite name. "You are not going to ask me why I helped you instead of just passing through." "I figure you will tell me when you want to," he said. She held his gaze for a long moment. "You are a strange man, Aaron Wells. You know my name. I told you, the ferryman is very talkative." He wanted to smile and held it back. He turned to the strongbox instead, thought better of trusting it again, and tucked the deed into the inner pocket of his coat that hung on the wall peg. He shrugged the coat on over his undershirt, found his boots, his heavy cloak, his belt knife. When he turned around, she was still there. "You should go," he said again, gently. "I will," she said. "After." "After what?" "After we deal with the fact that the man Gurn sent to watch the back of the toll house has been standing in the alley between the smithy and the wood store for the past 2 hours, she said. "And after we figure out what you are going to do about Gurn himself, because those 3 at the ford are not the main event. Gurn is a day's ride north. He will come when his men send word. They will send word before midday." Aaron breathed slowly. He had known the reckoning was coming, and he had planned for it in the abstract, the way a man plans for a storm he can see on the horizon but does not quite believe will actually reach him. He had a right to this crossing. He had the deed, properly signed and sealed, filed with the Rivingard Land Office 3 years ago when he had paid the last installment of the purchase price with everything his father left him. He had friends in the settlement, Tosker the smith, Pella the tavern keeper, but none of them were fighters and none of them had the standing to argue land rights against a clan champion. "What are you proposing?" he said. "I am not proposing anything," she said. "I am staying until this is resolved." He looked at her. "Why?" She picked up one of the short axes from her belt and set it on the table, then picked it back up and settled it on her hip with a practiced motion that suggested the question made her less comfortable than the weapon. "Because I watched you this morning before I came in. You stood at that window for a long time before you noticed me in your toll house, and you were not looking at those men on the road. You were looking at the bridge." He waited. "A man who looks at a bridge that way built something real," she said. "I have met enough men who take things that belong to other people. I have less patience for it than I used to." He heard something underneath those words that she was not saying. He filed it away and did not press it. "All right," he said. "If you are staying, then you should eat something. I have bread and salt pork." She looked at the bread and salt pork he produced from the cold box, and she looked at him, and her mouth did something that was almost a smile. "You feed every orc who breaks into your strongbox. Only the ones who bring back what they stole," he said. They ate standing at the table in the cold morning light, and he built the fire up and they watched the road through the window, and he told her everything he knew about Gurn Blacktusk's claim. And she told him about the legal trick with the deed and the land office, and he realized after a while that she knew a great deal more about orc land law and frontier property rights than most orc warriors had any reason to know. "You have done this before," he said. "Helped someone keep what was theirs." She broke a piece of bread with her hands. "Once or twice." "Who did you help?" She chewed. She looked out the window. "My sister's husband had a ferry crossing on the Greywash. Gurn's brother ran the same scheme on him 6 years ago. My sister's husband did not have anyone who knew how to fight it." He understood then the texture of her investment, the weight behind the flat, efficient way she had laid out the facts. It was not abstract, it never had been. "I am sorry," he said. "He is not dead," she said. "He lost the crossing. He works on a grain barge now." She said it the way people say things that still hurt when the scab is pressed. "Gurn Blacktusk's brother has the Greywash ferry and takes the best coin from every trader on the eastern route. My sister sends me letters. She is fine. I hate it." "So this is personal," he said. "Everything is personal," she said. "Anyone who says otherwise is lying or not paying attention." He found he agreed with that completely and told her so, and she looked at him sideways with an expression he could not decode yet, something between appraisal and surprise. He had the feeling she was revising something, some expectation she had arrived with. Outside, the dawn was hardening into gray morning, and the 3 riders at the ford had not moved. The settlement of Ashford Crossing woke slowly in winter. Smoke began to rise from the chimneys. Oscar opened the smithy doors, and the first clang of iron rang across the frozen ground. Pella at the tavern pushed open the shutters and leaned out and looked at the sky the way she did every morning, calculating weather. Aaron watched all of it from the toll house window and thought about what Sharamph had said that Gurn himself would come by midday. "I need to open the bridge," he said. "I have traders waiting. There is a wool caravan that crosses every month." "Opening the bridge means those 3 have a reason to come to the toll gate," she said. "Yes," he said. "And when they do, I want them to see the deed in the strongbox where it belongs." She looked at him sharply. "A copy," he said. "I made one last autumn when I first heard Gurn was interested in the crossing. Paper from the land office, the same wax, my own seal stamp. It is good enough to fool a man who is not a clerk." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "And the real deed." He patted his coat pocket. "On my person. They cannot file a loss of title claim if they cannot produce the original document in front of a magistrate, and they cannot produce it if it is stitched into my coat." She looked at him with an expression that had moved firmly out of the appraisal range into something warmer. "You are smarter than you look, Aaron Wells." "People say that," he said, "and I have decided to take it as a compliment." He put the copy deed in the strongbox, locked it with a new pin he set himself, and went to open the bridge. The cold hit him like a fist. The temperature had dropped another degree overnight, and the bridge stones were glazed with ice, and the cauldron groaned beneath them, the black water grinding at the downstream edge of the ice cover. He lit the toll lantern and hung it on the hook and raised the crossing flag, and within 20 minutes the wool caravan came down from the northern settlement 4 wagons, 8 men. And while they were paying and crossing, Aaron watched the 3 riders detach from their position at the far end of the bridge and come toward him. They were large, all 3. 2 humans and an orc, heavy-coated and cold-eyed in the way of men who have been sitting in frost for 2 hours waiting for a door to open. The orc among them was the one who spoke. "Wells," he said, not asking. "That is me," Aaron said. "We are here on behalf of Gurn Blacktusk, who holds a claim of interest in this crossing. We will need to see the title deed for the bridge and the land on which it stands." "Of course," Aaron said pleasantly. He unlocked the toll house and showed them the strongbox and opened it and let them see the copy deed. The orc messenger leaned over it, read the key lines, examined the seal. He did not touch it. Aaron watched his eyes and saw the calculation there. This man knew enough to be suspicious, but not enough to be certain. Satisfied, Aaron said, "For now," the messenger said. They left. They went back to the far bank, and one of the humans mounted and rode north at a gallop, and Aaron knew that was Gurn's summons being answered. He went back inside the toll house and found Sharamph sitting on the edge of the desk with her arms folded, having watched the whole exchange through the slit window. "Well done," she said. "It buys us time," he said. "Gurn will come with someone who knows documents. He will know the copy for what it is. Then we need a plan for Gurn. Do you have one?" She unfolded her arms and set both hands on the desk. "I have half of one. Tell me about the magistrate at Rivingard. Is he honest?" "Magistrate Corin? Yes, painfully so. He declined a bribe from the mine consortium last spring, and they tried to have him removed, and he wrote them a letter that apparently made several of them weep." "Good," she said, "because what we need is for you to file a protective affidavit with his office stating that the deed has been in your continuous possession, and that any claim of loss or abandonment is fraudulent. If that affidavit is on file before Gurn can make his claim, his whole scheme falls apart." "Rivingard is 2 days' ride," Aaron said. "Yes, Gurn is coming today." "Yes." He looked at her, she looked at him. The fire crackled. "Someone has to hold the bridge," he said, "and someone has to ride to Rivingard." "Those are the 2 options," she agreed. "I cannot ask you to hold this bridge." "You did not ask," she said. "I am telling you, I will hold the bridge, you ride." He felt something in his chest that was not quite gratitude and not quite admiration, but partook of both in equal measure, and underneath it something else that he was not ready to name yet, something warm and complicated and very much alive. He had been alone at this crossing for a long time. Not miserable. He was not a man given to misery, but alone in the specific way that comes from days and years of work that is yours and yours entirely, with no one to share the weight of it or the worry or the small satisfactions. The feeling of her presence in the toll house had been, from the first moment, not an intrusion. It had been something closer to relief. "Sharamph," he said. "Do not make it sentimental," she said. "I am not doing it for sentiment. I hate what Gurn Blacktusk represents. I am using your crossing as the place where I do something about it. That is the arrangement." "Fine," he said. He got his horse from the stable behind the toll house, saddled it, packed his saddlebag with the deed, his seal stamp, and enough silver for 2 nights in Rivingard. He was tightening the cinch when she came around the corner of the stable and stopped a few feet away. "Aaron," she said. He turned. She crossed the distance in 2 steps and took his face in both her hands, which were warm and rough-calloused and larger than a human woman's hands, and she kissed him once, hard and direct, the way she did everything, and then she stepped back and let him go. He stood there for a moment with the cold air in his lungs and the feel of her mouth still on his. "What was that for?" he said. "Good luck," she said. "And because I wanted to and I did not see any reason to wait. Go." He went. He rode north at a gallop and then south at a canter when the road turned, and he reached Rivingard in a day and a half by riding through the short winter afternoon and through most of the night, stopping only to rest the horse. He filed the affidavit with Magistrate Corin's office the next morning, the real deed on the table, the magistrate's clerk copying it twice and sealing both copies, the original returned to Aaron's inner pocket. Magistrate Corin himself came out to speak with him and listened to the full account of Gurn Blacktusk's method, his face going progressively colder. "I will send a rider to the Stoneback Ridge land agent," Corin said. "Blacktusk has been working this scheme across 4 river crossings in 3 years. I have wanted a complete case against him. This affidavit and your testimony give me one." He paused. "You said there is someone holding your bridge." "Yes," Aaron said. "Who?" "A warrior named Sharamph Stonefist." Corin's eyebrows rose. "An orc warrior is holding the Coldrun crossing while you ride to file documents." "She is," Aaron said, and he did not bother to explain any further because there was nothing about it that required explanation. He turned the horse around and rode back north. While Aaron rode south to Rivingard, Sharamph was doing things at Ashford Crossing that the settlement would be talking about for the rest of the winter and well into the spring thaw. The morning was still new when Gurn Blacktusk came down the northern road at the head of 7 men. He was larger than any of them, an orc of middle age with a scarred jaw and a champion's braided topknot, and a voice built for crowds and intimidation. He came to the toll gate and found it closed, and Sharamph Stonefist standing on the bridge's near end with her war blade drawn and both short axes on her belt, and a posture that communicated exactly how much she welcomed the visit. The whole settlement had come out by then. Pella was standing in the tavern doorway. Oscar had his smithing hammer over his shoulder. Several of the households had people at their windows or standing in their yards in the cold, because word had traveled fast that something was happening at the bridge, and in Ashford crossing that kind of word always traveled fast. "Stand aside," Gurn said. He said it in the way of a man who has never in his life had to say it twice. "No," Sharamph said. The word rang out over the frozen river like a struck bell. Several of the watchers along the bank edge saw her face when she said it and felt the temperature drop another degree. "This crossing is under claim of interest by—" "There is no valid claim," she said. "There is a protective affidavit on file with Magistrate Corin in Rivingard, and the original deed is in the possession of the rightful title holder who is not here. You have no legal standing to enter these premises, take these tolls, or touch anything on this bridge." Gurn's scarred jaw tight. "I have 7 men." "I noticed," she said. "Do you want me to count them out loud for you? I can do that. I can also count the 7 ways this goes badly for you if you cross this line, starting with the fact that I know about the Greywash Ferry and the name Harvin Tusk, and the land office clerk in Durnport who takes 10% to look the other way. And that name and that fact are already written in a letter that goes to Magistrate Corin's office if I do not cancel it by the next post day." A silence settled over the entire crossing. On the bank, Oscar lowered his hammer. Pella had her arms folded and the expression of a woman watching a very satisfying play. Even Gurn's 7 men had gone very still. "You are bluffing," Gurn said. "I never bluff," Sharamph said. "It is a waste of time. I called it a bluff once and it did not end well for the other person. I prefer facts. The fact is, I have been building a file on your family's scheme across 6 crossings for 2 years. Your brother's greywash operation is the one I know best. You go through this gate and I will burn you down to the foundation." Gurn Blacktusk stared at her for a very long time. The river groaned under the ice. A horse stamped. Somewhere on the bank a child sneezed and a mother shushed it, and in the absolute frozen silence of that moment the sneeze was the loudest thing for 100 yards. Gurn turned his horse. He did not say anything. He turned it and rode back north, and his 7 men peeled after him in a clump, and the whole watching crowd at Ashford Crossing held its collective breath until the last rider disappeared around the granite shoulder of the hill. And then Pella the tavern keeper let out a whoop that cracked the silence like an axe through green wood. Sharamph put her war blade away. She turned to the crowd and found 24 people staring at her with expressions that ranged from astonishment to something that was cautiously approaching warmth. And she met those stares with the even, measured look of a woman who has said exactly what she meant and is satisfied with the geometry of it. "Well," said Oscar the smith. He scratched his jaw. He had a jaw like a blunt axe and a voice like a bellows, and he had lived at this crossing for 20 years and he had seen a number of things. He walked across the bank to where Sharamph stood at the gate, stopped in front of her and held out his hand. "Oscar," he said, "I make things out of iron. You need something made, you find me." She shook his hand. He winced very slightly at the grip and respected her for it. "The bridge is open," she announced to the road. "Standard tolls, 2 coppers for a single person, 6 for a cart. No exceptions, no waiting on the cold side for anyone." She added the last part with a flatness that dared contradiction and received none. Aaron came back 2 days later at the start of the afternoon, his horse tired and his hands cold, and his saddlebag holding 2 copies of the certified affidavit that Magistrate Corin had insisted he take. He rode down into Ashford Crossing and found Pella in the road waiting for him, and from the look on her face he understood that he had missed something significant. "Your bridge is fine," Pella said. "Your toll gate is fine. Your toll house is untouched. I believe the lock on your strongbox may have been improved." She paused. "Also, Gurn Blacktusk came and left without crossing, and the orc woman you left in charge apparently told him something about a clerk in Durnport that made him look like a man who has sat on a very cold iron spike. Aaron blinked. He processed this. "Where is she?" he said. "Told me she was going to check the bridge piers for ice damage," Pella said, and she was smiling with the full warmth of a woman who has decided to approve of something entirely. He found Sharamph on the bridge, 40 feet out over the cauldron, lying flat on the stone parapet and looking down the side of the bridge pier at the ice accumulation around the base. She had borrowed a rope from somewhere and tied it to an iron ring in the stone and was leaning over far enough to make anyone watching uncomfortable. When she heard his boots on the bridge, she pushed herself back from the edge and sat up, and when she saw it was him, something moved fast across her face quick as water over stone there and then smoothed, and she stood. "You filed it," she said. "Corin is building a case against Gurn across all 6 crossings. He called it the most useful affidavit he has seen in 5 years. He stopped in front of her on the bridge. The wind came off the river between them, bitter and clean. Pella told me what happened. Pella talks too much. She told me you held the gate against 7 men. I held the gate against 1 man's fear of consequences," Sharamph said. "The other 7 were furniture. She told me the whole settlement watched. Yes, she looked out at the frozen river. I may have been somewhat theatrical about it. She also told me," he said, "that when they were gone you opened the bridge and ran it all day and charged everyone the same toll and did not make anyone wait." She shrugged, though it was not quite a careless shrug. "It was cold. There was no reason to make people stand in it." He looked at her. The afternoon light came down through the cloud cover in long, flat panels, and it touched her face and the copper wire in her braid and the worn green leather of her bodice, and he thought about the kiss she had given him outside the stable quick and certain and deeply, specifically her, and he thought that he had been standing at this bridge alone for 6 years and that the crossing had never felt less lonely than it did right now with her standing on it. "Sharamph," he said. She looked at him. "Thank you," he said. "For the deed, for the gate, for all of it." She looked away again, jaw set. "You would have managed." "Maybe," he said, "but you made it cleaner. You always make things cleaner." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Corin, is he actually moving on Gurn?" "He is writing the summons himself," Aaron said. "Gurn Blacktusk is going to have to answer for the Greywash Ferry, the Durnport clerk, and 3 other crossings before spring." Corin seemed personally motivated. "Good," she said, and the word carried a weight he understood now. Her sister, the grain barge, the years of it. "The Greywash Ferry," he said carefully. "If Gurn's claim is voided there, the crossing reverts to the original title holder." She turned to look at him slowly. "Is your sister's husband's name on the original title?" he said. Her jaw was very tight. "It would be 6 years of back pay and seized tolls," she said, "plus damages. He would never see it. Corin's office will have authority to compel restitution if the fraud is proven," Aaron said. "It is not certain, but it is possible," she breathed. She looked at him with the amber eyes gone very still and something behind them that was raw in a way the rest of her was not. Something she had been carrying for a long time in a body built for carrying things without complaint, and he wanted, with a clarity that surprised him, to take some of that weight. "You looked that up," she said. "In Rivingard. You asked about the Greywash." "I might have mentioned it to Corin," he said. "I might have mentioned that the scheme had precedence." He seemed interested. She turned back to the river. Her hands were on the parapet and he could see how tightly they were clenched. "You did not have to do that," she said. "You came back at dawn with my stolen deed," he said. "You did not have to do that either." A long silence. The river groaned beneath them. The wind cut across the bridge and she did not flinch from it, but he saw her breathe in slowly, deliberately, the way people breathe when they are keeping something from showing. "I do not know what to do with you," she said, not unkindly. Almost helplessly, which on a woman like Sharamph Stonefist was a remarkable thing to hear. "Stay a while," he said. "We can figure it out." She stayed. She stayed through the rest of the first week. Sleeping on a cot she insisted on setting up on the opposite side of the toll house from his because she said she needed her own space, and she was not the kind of person who crowded others. and she repaired the lock on the strongbox with a better mechanism she bought from a tinker who came through on the third day. She improved the piling braces on the northeast pier that she had identified from her inspection as developing weak points. She helped him collect the tolls on 3 successive mornings without being asked, taking up a position at the far side of the gate while he worked the near side, and the arrangement was so natural that it was several days before either of them remarked on it. What she did not do was kiss him again. She did not touch him. She maintained a precise and deliberate distance and treated him with a courtesy that was warm but very measured, and he understood without needing it explained that the kiss at the stable had cost her more than it looked, that a woman who moved through the world as self-sufficiently as she did not do things like that without consequence to herself, and that she was currently renegotiating something internal. He waited. He was good at waiting. 6 years at a river crossing had made him good at it. On the 9th day after his return from Rivingard, Gurn Blacktusk came back. He came alone this time, which was either a good sign or a terrible one, and he left his horse at the far end of the bridge and walked across on foot in the way of someone who wants a conversation, not a confrontation. Sharamph saw him from the toll house window and was outside, and at the gate before Aaron had finished lacing his boots, and when Aaron came out, she was standing at the gate with her arms folded and her expression carrying exactly 0 warmth. Gurn stopped 5 feet from the gate. Up close he was bigger than his reputation, and his reputation was large. The scar on his jaw had the texture of old story and the kind of violence that left marks. He looked at Sharamph first and then at Aaron. "Magistrate Corin has sent me a summons," he said. "Good," Aaron said. "You filed the affidavit," Gurn said, "not accusatory, stating a fact." "I did," Aaron said. "The deed has been in continuous and documented possession. Your claim has no legal standing." Gurn's eyes moved to Sharamph. He said. "You told me you had a letter about Harvin and the Durnport clerk." "I did," she said. "I do." "My brother," Gurn said, and something shifted in the lines of his face. Not quite regret, something that lived in the same neighborhood. "If Corin opens the Greywash case, Harvin Tusk stole a man's livelihood," Sharamph said, "through fraud. Over 6 years, the consequences of that are Harvin's and yours for running the same scheme here." Gurn was quiet. He looked out at the bridge, at the river, at the gray sky. "I had investors," he said. "The crossing would have paid well." "The crossing belongs to Aaron Wells," she said. "It is not a question of payment." Another silence. The cold pressed down. Then Gurn said, "The summons requires me to appear in Rivingard in 40 days. He looked at Aaron. "I will be appearing. I expect the investigation will be thorough." "I expect so too," Aaron said. Gurn looked at them both one more time. He had the look of a man recalculating something large and finding the numbers disagreeable. Then he turned and walked back across the bridge and mounted his horse and rode away north, and this time something in the way he rode said it was permanent. Sharamph let out a slow breath. "He will face it," she said. "He is not a coward. He is a man who decided the law was a tool for people with enough money to use it. When the law turns out to have teeth, men like that face it straight." "Do you admire him?" Aaron said, surprised. "No," she said, "but I understand him." "Understanding is not the same as admiring." He looked at her. The morning was cold and bright, a clean sky for once, and she was standing in the winter light with her breath making small clouds and her copper wire braid catching the sun, and she was, he thought, one of the most remarkable people he had ever stood next to. "Sharamph," he said. She turned. He stepped forward and kissed her this time, doing it the way she had done it to him, direct and certain, and she made a small sound of surprise against his mouth that she almost immediately converted into something entirely different. And her hand came up and closed around the front of his coat and held him there. And the kiss lengthened into something that was less like an exchange and more like a declaration. When they broke apart, her eyes were open and looking at him very closely. "I thought you were going to wait," she said. "I was," he said, "but I thought about your philosophy on bluffing." The corner of her mouth moved. "My philosophy on bluffing. Facts are better." "That is what you said, so here is the fact." He did not look away from her. "I want you to stay, not because of the toll gate or the piers or the lock on the strongbox, because I wake up in the morning and the first thing I think about is what you are going to say next, and that is new for me, and I do not want to go back to what it was before." She was very still. The hand on his coat had not released him. "I have not stayed anywhere in 3 years," she said. "I know. I am not an easy person to live with. I have noticed that. I like it." "Aaron," she said, and his name in her mouth had a quality he could not describe, careful somehow, like she was handling something she did not want to drop. "I am not asking you to decide everything today," he said. "I am asking you to stop calculating whether you have an exit and just stay. For now, see what happens." She looked at him for a long time. The river moved under the ice. Smoke lifted from the tavern chimney. The ordinary life of Ashford Crossing went on around them in the thin winter morning. "I am very bad at not having an exit," she said. "I know," he said. "I am not asking you to be good at it. I am asking you to choose it anyway." She released his coat. She smoothed the fabric where she had grabbed it, a gesture so incongruously domestic on a woman who had just faced down a clan champion that he nearly smiled. She turned and looked at the bridge, at the crossing, at the stone span her sister's husband had lost the equivalent of elsewhere, and that she had stood on for 2 weeks as though it were her own. "I need to write to my sister," she said. "There is paper and ink in the toll house," he said. She turned back to him. The amber eyes were warm in a way they had not been that first morning at the table, and he thought the difference was enormous, that it was the whole distance between dawn and full light. "All right," she said, "for now." She stayed for the winter. Then she stayed for the spring. The letter to her sister went out on the first post south in February, and the reply came back in March, a page of cramped writing, and one line that Sharamph read 3 times in the light of the oil lamp while Aaron pretended not to watch her from across the toll house. When she finally set it down, she said, very quietly, "Corin's office sent a notice to the Greywash. The fraud investigation has been formally opened. My sister's husband has been asked to submit testimony." "That is good," Aaron said carefully. "It is very good," she said. She held the letter a moment longer. "She says he cried. He did not say anything. He just got up and put his hand on her shoulder." And she sat very still for a moment, and then leaned her head the smallest degree toward his hand, the kind of motion you could pretend you had not made. And he pretended he had not noticed because he understood that she needed to keep some ground of her own. But she did not move away. In the weeks after that, they stopped pretending that the arrangement was temporary. Her gear migrated from the saddlebag. She had never properly unpacked to the shelf he cleared for her on the wall, and her short axes found a permanent spot on the hook beside his belt knife, and they fell into the rhythms of the crossing together, him on the morning toll, her on the structural checks and the pier maintenance, both of them on market days, when the volume ran high and 2 gate tenders made everything smoother. The settlement accepted her with the particular pragmatic grace of people who live in hard places and have learned that useful is a virtue that overrides most categories. Oscar asked her opinion on a harness fitting he was making for a trader's draft horse, and she gave it with precision, and he made the adjustment, and they shook hands again with mutual respect. Pella started saving her a seat near the fire on the evenings when Aaron brought them both to the tavern for supper. The evenings in the tavern were the best of it. Not the loudest or the most dramatic. The dramatic parts came later, but the best in the quiet way that mattered most. They ate and they talked, which turned out to be something they were both very good at in the specific way that 2 particular people are good at talking to each other, as though the conversation had been waiting for both participants to arrive and was glad they finally had. She told him about the 3 years of wandering after she left her clan at 22, the reasons for leaving still not fully given, but implied in the margins in, the things she had learned in that time. Property law, locksmithing, the particular frauds that crossed trade routes, how to hold a bridge. He told her about his father and the building of the crossing and the 6 years of managing it alone, and the steady absence of a person to share either the labor or the view. And she listened to him in the way she did everything completely, with her full attention, leaving no part of what he said unexamined. On the night in late February when the storm came down off the northern peaks and buried Ashford Crossing in 3 feet of snow and sealed the bridge under ice too thick to clear safely, they stayed in the toll house through 3 days of white silence, and by the end of those 3 days they were not sleeping on separate cots. He had not been wrong about any of it. The warmth of her was not just physical but total. She gave her whole attention, her whole self, with a fierceness that was the other face of her efficiency. When she was completely in, and the profound care with which she held him in the still dark of the toll house made him feel, for the first time in years, that he was known by someone. Not observed. Known. She was fierce even in tenderness, which made perfect sense. She was fierce in everything. The warmth of her was the same quality as the cold directness, the same force, applied differently, and he was glad of it. He had not wanted something gentle and remote. He had wanted something real. Afterward she lay with her head on his shoulder, and he felt her breathing slow, and he looked at the ceiling of the toll house, and thought about the deed in his coat pocket, and the morning she had brought it back, and said she hated loose ends. And he understood now that the loose end she could not leave was him, not as a project or an obligation, but as something she had recognized in that first morning, the way you recognize a place you have not been to before but have somehow always known. He did not say this to her because it was the middle of the night, and she was nearly asleep, and some things were better kept for morning. In the morning she was already awake before him, which was always true, and she had the fire up and the kettle on, and she was sitting at the table with a piece of paper and a pen, and she was writing. He watched her from the cot, and she did not look up, but she said, "I can hear you thinking from here. Go back to sleep." "What are you writing?" he said. "A letter to Corin," she said, "about the 4th crossing in Gurn's scheme, the Kettleford Bridge at the Arne Junction. There is a toll warden there named Breen who I believe has been cooperating with Gurn's agents under duress. If Corin knows about the duress, Breen's testimony will be worth more to the case than Gurn probably expects." He sat up. "How do you know about Breen?" "I stayed at the Kettleford Crossing for a week 2 years ago," she said. "Breen was afraid of something, and I did not understand it at the time. I understand it now." He looked at her, the copper wire braid, the steady hand with the pen, the green leather of her bodice bright in the morning firelight, and felt the thing in his chest that he had been not quite naming for weeks crystallize into something clear and unmistakable and enormous. "Sharamph," he said. "If you are going to say something sentimental, I have a letter to finish," she said. "I love you," he said. The pen stopped. She sat very still for a moment, her hand on the paper, not looking up. "That is a large thing to say at this hour of the morning," she said. "I know," he said. "I also know it is true, and I am not interested in waiting until some designated appropriate time to say it." She set the pen down. She turned in the chair and looked at him across the small room, and the firelight was between them, and her eyes were the color of winter honey and very bright. "Aaron Wells," she said. "Sharamph Stonefist," he said. "You are—" She stopped. She pressed her lips together in the way she did when she was getting a grip on something that was trying to slip. "You are the only person in 10 years who has made me want to stay in one place," she said. "I do not know whether to thank you for that or resent you for it." "You could do both," he said. "I can handle it." Something broke open in her face, not shattering, not dramatic, just the shift you see when a door that has been held closed for a very long time is finally let go. She crossed the room in 4 steps and sat on the edge of the cot, and took his face in both her hands the way she had done at the stable, and looked at him very carefully. "I love you too," she said. "I have been trying to find a logical reason why that is premature and inadvisable, and I have run out of arguments." He kissed her. She held his face and kissed him back, and outside the window the cauldron groaned and the winter held on, and neither of them cared at all. The logical reason that it was inadvisable arrived in the spring in the form of a man named Draven Crail. Draven Crail was a human, tall and lean and good-looking in a way that knew it, a traveling sale agent for a timber consortium operating out of the southern towns. He came through the Cauldron Crossing in early April with a wagon loaded with contract papers and a smile that had clearly opened many doors, and he paid his toll and chatted amicably with Aaron, and then saw Sharamph at the near pier and stopped chatting. He came back the next day without the wagon. He came back the day after that as well, and on the third visit he ignored Aaron and went directly to Sharamph at the pier where she was examining a new crack in the mortar and said, with the confidence of a man who has very rarely been told no, "I would like to buy you a drink at the tavern this evening. I know the best seat by the fire." "Pella has already given that seat to me," Sharamph said without looking up from the mortar. "And I have an existing arrangement." "An arrangement," Draven said. He looked toward the toll house where Aaron was currently processing a line of wagons, with the toll warden. "With Aaron Wells," she said. "Yes." Draven looked at the toll house and back at her, with the expression of a man reviewing an arithmetic problem that he believes must have an error. "He is a toll warden," he said. "He is the deed holder and bridge warden of the Cauldron Crossing," she said. "He built this crossing with his father and has maintained it for 6 years, and holds a certified title with the Rivingard Land Office. He is also, which is the part relevant to you, the person I am in love with. I am telling you this as clearly as I can because I do not enjoy imprecision and I want there to be no confusion about the nature of the situation." Draven stared at her. "You are in love with Aaron Wells," she said. "Yes." "Are you going to need me to repeat it?" Draven, to his credit, had enough good sense to understand that he was done. He left. He came through the crossing 2 more times that spring with Timber Consortium business, and he was perfectly civil, and he did not revisit the topic. And Aaron, who had seen the whole exchange from the gate and had heard most of it because the morning was still and voices carried, did not say anything about it until that evening when they were closing the gate and Sharamph said without preamble, "I told Draven Crail we were not available." "I heard," Aaron said. "You were going to let him court me." She said, not quite accusatory, more like she was testing the ground. "I was going to trust that you could handle it," he said, "which you did in about 30 seconds. She stopped walking. He took 3 more steps before he realized she had stopped and turned back to her. She was standing in the last of the afternoon light with the wind lifting the loose strands of her braid and an expression on her face that was complicated and open and entirely undefended. "You trusted me," she said. "Of course I did," he said. "Aaron." She said his name like it meant something specific and private. "Do you understand how few people have trusted me to handle my own affairs? How many have tried to step in front of me or negotiate on my behalf or—" "You do not need anyone in front of you," he said. "You need someone beside you. There is a difference." She crossed the distance between them and put her arms around him right there in the open road in front of the toll house, with the settlement of Ashford Crossing arranged around them in the early evening, and anyone who cared to look could look. And she pressed her face against the side of his neck and held on with the absolute fierce grip of a woman who has just made a decision she intends to keep. He held her back. He felt the solidity of her, the warmth and the strength, and thought that this was what it was like to be held by someone who could actually carry you. Not because you were helpless, but because they chose to, because the care was as real as the power and both were considerable. "Beside you," she said, muffled against his shoulder. "Yes," he said, "I can work with beside." "Good," he said. May brought the thaw and with it the news from Rivingard that had been building since February. A courier arrived with a sealed notice from Magistrate Corin. Gurn Blacktusk had appeared before the land court, represented by his own advocate, and had faced the assembled evidence of 4 fraudulent crossing claims. Breen of Kettleford had testified under the duress immunity provision that Sharamph had noted in her letter, and his testimony had been detailed and damning. The Durnport clerk had been suspended pending his own investigation. Gurn Blacktusk had been fined, stripped of any future claim to river crossing rights in the territory, and ordered to make restitution to 2 of the 4 crossings he had defrauded. The Greywash was one of the 2. The restitution amount was detailed on a separate page. It was not everything. It was 6 years of tolls calculated at the standard rate minus court costs, but it was substantial. Her sister's husband would not die a poor man off the back of a grain barge. Sharamph read the notice at the table in the toll house, and then she set it down and folded her hands and looked at the grain of the wood for a while. Aaron stood near the fire and did not hurry her. "She can go back to the gray wash," Sharamph said finally. "Thuron and my sister, if they want. The crossing reverts with a clean title." "Yes," he said. "She will want to," she said. "She always wanted to go back." She just never thought." She stopped. She pressed the heel of her hand to the table. 6 years of letters from her on a grain barge, and now— "Yes," he said. She looked up at him. Her eyes were very bright and she was absolutely not crying, and he loved her for the particular discipline of that, the pride she carried even in relief. "Thank you," she said, "for Corin, for mentioning it." "You came back at dawn with my stolen deed," he said for the second time, and she laughed. A real laugh, sudden and full, and it did something to the room, warmed it, changed the air, and he thought he could spend the rest of his life trying to make her laugh like that. Summer settled into Ashford Crossing like a guest who intended to stay. The trade volume doubled with the warm months, and the bridge worked hard wagons and caravans and drovers and peddlers, and twice a week the post rider, and once a month the revenue auditor from Rivingard who had been making extra trips since Corin's case. Aaron and Sharamph ran the gate together every day, and the settlement had stopped treating it as notable, which was itself notable. The ease with which they had become part of the crossing's fabric, both of them, inseparable and complementary, the way a good bridge is inseparable from its banks. Oscar built them a second strong room out of dressed stone at the back of the toll house, with a lock that he and Sharamph designed together over 2 evenings of debate that had ended with mutual satisfaction and a working mechanism. Pella started serving them supper as though they were her own family, which she said without saying it in the way she served larger portions, the better cut of the roast, the first choice of the day's bread. The settlement had not forgotten the morning she stood on the bridge against 7 men. It would not forget it for a long time. In June, a young orc woman came through the crossing with a trader's pack on her back and stopped at the gate and looked at Sharamph and said, "You are Stonefist. I heard what you did at this crossing in the winter, about Black Tusk." Sharamph collected the toll. 2 coppers, she said. "I was at the Kettleford crossing when Breen testified," the young woman said. "I know Breen. He was afraid for a long time. What you did, writing the letter, it freed him." Sharamph handed her the crossing receipt. "Go on," she said. "The road is clear to the north." The young woman went. Aaron, who had heard all of it, waited until she was out of earshot and then said, "You helped more people than you set out to." "I set out to close a loop," Sharamph said. "The loop was bigger than I thought." "The loop was bigger than you thought," he agreed. He was smiling. He could not help it. He had been smiling more in 5 months than in the previous 3 years combined, and while he was aware that this could be interpreted as a fairly direct statement about the source of his happiness, he had stopped being careful about such interpretations. She looked at his smile and the corner of her mouth moved. "You are very pleased with yourself," she said. "With you," he said. "There is a difference." She rolled her eyes, which was one of her most disarming gestures because it suggested a softness she would not otherwise admit, and went back to the gate. It was in August that the question of what they were, formally, to each other and to the crossing, came to a head. It came in the form of the annual title inspection, conducted by a land agent from Rivingard named Porset, who was not the warm sort. Porset arrived in a closed wagon and got out and looked at the toll house and looked at both of them and said, with the flatness of a bureaucrat who has decided not to make personal judgments but is making them, "The title is held by Aaron Wells, single landholder." This second party, he looked at Sharamph, is not on the record as a co-warden. "She works here," Aaron said. "In what capacity?" Porset said. Aaron opened his mouth. "Partner," Sharamph said. Porset looked at her. He looked at Aaron. Partner, Aaron said with absolute conviction, as though he had said it many times before. Porset wrote something in his ledger. A business partnership would require a formal filing with the Rivingard Land Office, he said. Alternatively, a joint title can be held under a deed of co-ownership, which requires a deed of co-ownership, Aaron said. How do I file for one? Porset looked up from his ledger. He blinked. He was not, perhaps, accustomed to people wanting to hand half of their property over during an inspection. You would need the original deed, Porset said, and a witness declaration from both parties, and the office processes it within. I have the original deed, Aaron said. He reached into his coat, still the same coat, the same inner pocket, and produced it, and Porset looked at it and looked at Aaron and at Sharamph, and the expression on his face was a complicated series of adjustments. Sharamph had gone very still. Aaron looked at her. "Unless you do not want, I want," she said, flatly and immediately. He held out the deed. She looked at it. "Your name next to mine," he said. "On the record, on this crossing, on this bridge," he paused, "which is also my home if you want it to be." She took the deed out of his hand. She held it and looked at it for a long moment, the wax seal, his cramped signature, the land office's stamp, and he watched her reading it the way she read everything, completely, taking it all in. "Your handwriting is terrible," she said. "I know," he said. "The crossing is in good repair," she said. "The piers are solid through another 3 years if we maintain the mortar. The toll house could use a new roof." "It could," he said. "I know a roofer in Ashford Village," she said. "He owes me a debt from a job I found him last spring." "Convenient," he said. She looked up from the deed. She looked at him. The summer afternoon was behind him, the cauldron running clear and low in the heat, the bridge open and people moving across it, the ordinary life of the crossing going on all around them, and she was standing in the middle of it with his deed in her hands and an expression that was, for Sharamph Stonefist, as close to unguarded as she had ever let him see her. "I want it," she said. "All of it." Porset cleared his throat. He produced a blank form from his bag. He said, "You will both need to sign, and I will need 2 witnesses." Oscar and Pella, who had been watching from their respective doors with varying degrees of pretending to be doing something else, were across the road in under a minute. The joint deed was filed in Rivingard in September, processed in 3 weeks because Corin had left instructions that anything from the Cauldron Crossing was to be prioritized, and returned to them in October in an envelope with a note from the magistrate that said only, "Well done, both of you." Aaron put it in the new strong room in the new lockbox that Sharamph and Oscar had built, and he did not put a copy in another location and did not feel the need to, because the deed now had 2 names on it, and both of those people were present and intended to remain so. But they were not done moving. It was Sharamph who said it first in November, when the cold came back and the river began to tighten at the edges, and they were sitting in the toll house in the evening. She was at the table with a map. She was always with a map in the evenings, route planning she called it, a habit she could not shake from the wandering years, and she said, without preamble and without looking up, "There is a crossing at Heron Pass." He looked up from the book he was reading. "I know Heron Pass. It is a mountain crossing," she said, 3 days east. "The road through the pass has been a gravel track for 30 years, and the bridge at the bottom is a toll crossing that has been mismanaged by 3 successive wardens in 8 years. The current one wants to sell. You have been looking at this," he said. "For 2 weeks," she said. She tapped the map. "The pass is a major route for the Eastern Mining Consortia. The volume is 3 times what we see here. The bridge is in poor repair, but the bones are good. I can tell from the surveyor's drawings I got from the Rivingard office. It needs work but not rebuilding. And the asking price," she slid a paper across the table to him, "is within what we could manage if we sell the Cauldron deed and combine it with what I have saved." He looked at the paper. He looked at the map. He looked at her. She was watching him with amber eyes, steady and careful, and something in them that was different from her professional assessments, something that was asking him a real question, not a logistics question but a direction of life question. "You want to do this," he said. "I want to build something," she said. "I have been maintaining things for a long time. I want to build." he sat back. He thought about Ashford crossing Pella and Oscar, and the tavern seat by the fire and the bridge he had maintained for 6 years. His father's bridge, the bridge he knew stone by stone and ice season by ice season. He thought about Sharamph sitting at the table with a map of the next place. "If we sell Cauldron," he said, "Pella will want the first right of purchase for the tavern arrangement." "I already spoke to her," Sharamph said. "She has a buyer for the toll rights, a warden from the south who has been looking for a crossing. He is honest, apparently. She vetted him." "You spoke to Pella before you spoke to me," he said. She looked at him steadily. "I was checking whether the plan was viable before I proposed it." He held the map. He held the map and the paper, and he thought about the feeling of that first morning, the deed on the table and the amber eyes watching him, and how the world had moved since then in a direction he had not planned and would not have traded for anything. "When did you want to go?" he said. She finally allowed herself a full smile, the kind she did not bother to modulate. "There is a post rider going east next week. I thought we could send a letter about the Heron Pass asking price and then leave in March when the road's clear." "March," he said. "That is 4 months. We have things to prepare," she said. "The sale of the deed, the transfer documentation, the Rivingard filing." She paused. "And I have been told the Cauldron crossing in winter is beautiful." "By whom?" he said. "By me," she said. "I have been watching it for a year." He reached across the table and turned the map toward himself and looked at the route to Heron Pass, the 3-day ride east, the mountain road, the bridge at the bottom with its poor repair and its good bones. He looked at her name on the top of the survey drawing where she had written it in her careful, precise hand. She had already put her name on it. She had already decided. She was asking him to decide too. "All right," he said. "March." She reached across and took his hand on the map. Her hand was warm and rough and certain, and she held it with the same firmness with which she held everything completely, without reservation, intending to keep it. They sent the letter east the following week. They received a reply in December confirming the asking price was negotiable, and the current warden would hold the offer through spring. They spent the winter doing exactly what she had described, maintaining the crossing, preparing the documentation for the Cauldron sale, sitting by the fire in the evenings with maps and plans, and the particular conversation of two people who are building something together, and have found that they are good at it. The Cauldron was beautiful in winter. She had been right. The ice formed in shapes along the pier bases that were different every morning, and the light on the snow was long and golden in the short afternoons, and the bridge itself was a constant thing in the middle of all the seasonal variation, stone and solid and unmoving. He stood on it in January and put his hand on the parapet and thought about his father and the 6 years and the morning she had walked in with the deed, and he felt the grief of leaving and the rightness of it in the same breath, which was perhaps the only honest way to leave anything you have loved. She found him there. She came and stood beside him without asking what he was thinking, which was one of the things he loved most about her. She knew when to wait and when to speak, and she was rarely wrong about which was which. "He built it well," she said, meaning his father. She had heard enough stories by now. "He did," Aaron said. "You kept it well," she said. "We did," he said. She turned to look at him, and he turned to look at her, and there was the bridge and the river, and the cold and the winter afternoon going golden at the edges. And she was exactly as she had been that first morning, direct and fierce and specific, and also entirely different. Because the woman standing beside him now was not the woman who had put down a stolen deed and offered him logistics. She was the woman who had chosen him and chosen him again, and who had put her name next to his on a document and on a map and on whatever came next. "I have something to say," she said. "Say it," he said. "I came to this crossing because I was passing through," she said. "I stayed because I was angry at Gurn Blacktusk. I stayed longer because," she stopped, she breathed, "because you said the right thing at the gate. You did not make me wait on the cold side. And I know that sounds like a small thing. It is not a small thing," he said. "No," she said. "It is not." She looked at him directly, fully, the way she looked at problems she intended to solve. You have never treated me like something to manage or to be patient with or to accommodate. You have treated me like, she paused again. He waited. Like I am exactly what I am, she said, and that I am welcome. He looked at her for a long moment. He felt the word build in him before he spoke it. You are welcome, he said. You have always been welcome, the whole time. She breathed. She turned back to the river. Then she reached out and took his hand where it rested on the parapet and laced her fingers through his, and they stood like that on the bridge in the last of the January light, with the cauldron grinding beneath them and the settlement at their backs and the eastern road ahead. February passed and March came in raw and changeable, the way mountain-edge springs always do. 2 warm days and then a hard freeze, and then more warmth and the ice pulling back from the banks in reluctant stages. They packed in the first week of March. The cauldron deed transferred to a warden named Sol, who came down from the regional office in good standing, and who Pella had indeed vetted with her usual thoroughness. Oscar built them a travel chest out of good hardwood with iron fittings and Sharamph's initials, beside Aaron's burned into the lid, and he presented it on the morning they were leaving with a gruffness that failed to conceal anything. Pella came out of the tavern with 2 wrapped parcels of food for the road, and stood in the street and looked at them both and said, "Come back and tell me how the mountain crossing goes." And then she hugged Sharamph with a fierceness that Sharamph permitted and returned, and she shook Aaron's hand and held it for a moment longer than a handshake requires. They loaded the wagon. They had bought a second horse and a small covered wagon for the journey, and drove out of Ashford Crossing in the early morning of the 8th of March, with the river still grinding under the last of the winter ice, and the sky going pale gold ahead of them in the east. Sharamph drove the wagon. She always drove. Aaron sat beside her with the map and the folder of documents and the Heron Pass correspondence, and his coat the same coat, the same inner pocket, and in that pocket the certified deed for the Cauldron Crossing, transferred now to Solt's name, and underneath it the folder from the Rivingard Land Office showing the preliminary survey of Heron Pass and the first notes toward a new filing. 2 names on the new filing, as they had been on the last. The road east was good for the first day and rocky for the second, and by the 3rd day it was climbing and they were in the foothills proper, the peaks rising ahead of them in white and gray, and the air thinning and sharpening. Sharamph drove with the same attention she gave everything, hands easy on the reins, eyes on the road, reading the surface and the grade without appearing to think about it. He watched her do it and thought about how long she had been moving through the world before he had met her and how much of herself she carried in that efficiency. The 3 years of roads, the locks opened, the schemes countered, the people helped who mostly did not know they were being helped, and how much she had set down in a toll house in the north without fully intending to. "What are you thinking about?" she said. "You," he said. "I know that," she said. "I can tell by the look. What specifically?" "The Kettleford Bridge," he said. "The one you stayed at 2 years ago, when you noticed Breen was afraid." "Yes, you just noticed," he said, "and you filed it away. And 2 years later, when it was relevant, you wrote the letter. You carry everything." She was quiet for a moment. "Is that a complaint?" "No," he said. "It is the opposite of a complaint. I am saying you have been taking care of things for a long time, people and places and problems, all of it." She kept her eyes on the road. "I want to help carry it," he said. "The things you have been carrying alone. I want to be the person you hand things to sometimes, not because you need someone to carry them. Because it is better when you do not have to do it alone." The road climbed through a curve of rock and opened onto a view, the valley behind them and the peaks ahead and the thin mountain air and the sky enormous and blue after weeks of winter gray. She pulled the horses to a stop. She sat for a moment looking at the view, then she turned to him. "I have been alone for a long time," she said. "Longer than 3 years." "I know," he said. "It is," she pressed her mouth together. "It is strange to not be. Still. Sometimes. Is it bad strange?" he said. "No," she said. It is the kind of strange that feels like she searched for the word with the visible effort she made when she wanted to be precise and was dealing with something that resisted precision. Like taking your boots off after a very long walk, she said. He looked at her and felt something enormous and simple. That is the most romantic thing you have ever said to me, he said. She stared at him. That is romantic. For you, he said, completely. She held his gaze for a moment and then she laughed. The same real laugh, sudden and full, and it did exactly what it always did to the air around them. And she shook the reins and the horses stepped on and they drove east into the mountain morning. Heron Pass was everything the survey had suggested. The bridge at the bottom of the pass was a long, low stone crossing over a mountain river called the Arnswick, running clear and cold even in March, and the toll house was in poor repair but structurally decent, and the road through the pass was, as Sharamph had said, a major route for the eastern trade. On the afternoon they sat on the bridge and looked at the water and at the peaks and at the state of the pier mortar, which was in fact exactly as the survey drawings had shown it. The north anchor needs repointing, she said, and the gate mechanism needs replacing. The ratchet is worn through. Old house needs a new roof, he said. I have the roofer's debt, she said. He smiled. He looked at the crossing that they were going to buy and fix and build into something, and he felt the particular rightness of a thing that fits. You knew this, was it, he said, when you first read the survey? Yes, she said. Why Heron Pass and not any of the other crossings? She looked at the bridge. She ran her hand along the parapet stone. The survey said the bones were good, she said. I have learned to trust bones. She looked at him. The structure underneath is the thing that matters. The rest can be fixed. He understood she was talking about more than mortar. The structure underneath is good, he said. Yes, she said. I know. They bought the Heron Pass crossing in April, the papers signed in the presence of a local notary and sent to Rivingard for certification. They spent the spring rebuilding what needed rebuilding. The roofer's debt was called in and Sharamph drove a hard bargain and got the best work the man had done in years. And by summer the crossing at Heron Pass was operating cleanly, the gate rebuilt, the piers repointed, the toll house solid and warm, and 2 names on the door in letters that Oscar had sent east in an iron casting as a belated moving gift. Aaron Wells and Sharamph Stonefist. Bridge wardens. Heron Pass. The eastern trade came through steadily through the summer and autumn, and the volume was everything the survey had predicted. She handled the structural and the legal, and the assessments of every trick or scheme that traveling merchants occasionally tried to run on a mountain crossing, and he handled the gate and the books and the relationships with the settlement that grew up around the pass in the months after they arrived. They were good at different things, and the same things, and neither of them felt the absence of what the other one carried. On an evening in October, with the peaks going white again and the first edge of winter sharpening the air and the Arnswick running lower in its channel, they sat on the bridge in the last of the light. The crossing was closed for the evening, and the settlement behind them had gone to its suppers, and the sky above the pass was going from orange to deep blue in the way that mountain skies do, quickly and completely. She had her head on his shoulder, and his arm was around her, and they were quiet in the way they had gotten good at, not the silence of people with nothing to say, but the silence of people who have said enough for now and are content to be still. No loose ends, she said. He thought about what she meant. Gurn Blacktusk answered before the court, her sister and Thuron back at the Greywash, Corin's case closed and filed, the Coldrun crossing in good hands, Breen of Kettleford free to speak, all of it closed. No, he said, no loose ends. She lifted her head and looked at him with the amber eyes in the evening light, and they were warm and clear and completely his. Good, she said. I hate them. He kissed her. She kissed him back, and the mountains stood around them in the October cold, and the crossing was theirs, and the next morning would bring the road open again, and the trade coming through, and all the ordinary work of a life that was real and built and shared. He had been alone at a crossing for 6 years, and then she had come in at dawn with his stolen deed and no explanation. And the explanation, it turned out, was everything. It was enough. More than enough. It was exactly right.